If assembly members return to the dais, please, we got one last work session. We've been joined with the mayor for this discussion.
Are these yours or are these mine?
Let's go around and introduce ourselves for the record. Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Sullivan. Lately, Zep with HF&H Consultants.
Elvie Great Jackson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dick Trainee Assembly.
Bernie Hall.
Bill Evans.
I do have one of these. Tim Steele?
Okay. And I'm told we have a technical difficulty with the computer. I can't believe it actually happened, but apparently we do.
Did I say that I was here?
No, go ahead, Jen.
Jennifer Dawson.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I'll turn the time over to you now, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, as we know, several weeks ago, we had the discussion about engaging the Assembly in a resolution to advise the administration on possible sale, amongst other options for the solid waste collection services. And as I mentioned a couple of Assembly meetings ago, we immediately then decided that we better get you the right information. So if there was going to be a public hearing on that resolution and a work session, it was our duty to make sure you got good info. And so this report is designed to do just that. We've got an organization, HF&H Consultants, who specialize in doing just this kind of evaluation for utilities and refuse utilities in particular. So we feel that we've got some good, solid information to present to the Assembly. And with that, I'll turn it over to Late.
Thank you, Mayor Sullivan. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for taking some time out on a Friday afternoon to talk a little trash with me. My name is Lately Zett. I'm a Senior Vice President with HF&H Consultants, and I'm a trash expert. That's all I do 24/7. I've been doing it for 25 years. I don't do airports one day and roads the next. I do nothing but trash and recycling for a living. We've helped more than 300 cities in the western United States with their solid waste and recycling programs, planning, implementing, evaluating. And importantly, we don't work for any waste haulers. We do that to avoid any sort of conflict of interest in these sorts of matters. We only provide these sorts of services to public agencies. Today I'm going to present the highlights of our refuse valuation study. A lot of the findings are interrelated. It might work best if we hold the questions till we get to the end, but certainly I'm prepared to take your questions as we go through it.
Which way makes you more comfortable?
I'm comfortable either way. I've worked in most environments.
What? We'll hold them then to the end.
Okay. So then, if you're ready, let's talk some trash. I'm going to slide past the agenda slide. And by way of background, I'm going to be referring to the acronym SWS, which is Solid Waste Services. That's the Anchorage group that provides the solid waste collection here in the city. And they have the exclusive right to provide services in the core areas of the city, the historic areas, the downtown areas. Another term we're going to be using is the word bin. And when I say commercial bin, I mean like a dumpster, 3 cubic yard bin you see behind a restaurant. That's different than a roll-off box. When I talk about a roll-off box, that's a big 40-yard container you'd see at a construction site. So Solid Waste or SWS has the exclusive right in its core areas to provide residential and commercial bin service. The roll-off services are provided by a variety of private haulers that compete for customers. We are not talking about those services today. The residential areas that are not served by SWS are served by Waste Connections. And in those, and that's what I'm calling the Waste Connection service area. It's also part of Anchorage. The commercial service, commercial bin service in the Waste Connections area is not exclusive. Other companies can provide service there, so they have to compete, although it appears that Waste Connections has the lion's share of those commercial customers. Another difference is in the Waste Connections service area, the residential rates are regulated by the RCA, whereas the residential rates in the SWS area are not regulated by the RCA. The city sets those rates. The municipality sets those rates. An important nuance here is you're under a 1982 Certificate of Public Convenience, you're exempt from rate regulation. However, there is a kind of an odd provision in the Alaska statutes that could allow the RCA to exert jurisdiction should they choose to, because your other utility, light and power, is regulated by the RCA. There's language that says if they regulate one utility, they can regulate all the utilities. So it's just something to be aware of. So let's jump to the objectives on page 2. We were asked to assist the municipality in its evaluation of its refuse options, and specifically to do 2 things: estimate a range of values if you were to sell the utility, and then with that to look at how your intergovernmental charges, or IGCs as we call them, how those would be impacted if you could no longer recover those costs which you're allocating to the refuge utility. You have a number of fixed overhead costs that would not go away if you sell the utility, and those costs would have to be allocated to other city departments or other city utilities. And we'll be talking more about that. Turn to page 3. These are specific options we looked at. Option 1, the sale of the utility, and under the assumption that you don't just take the money and spend it the next day, but that you invest it in your MOA trust fund. And we'll talk more about what sort of revenues that might generate. Option 2 is continued municipal service, but with a twist. 2 things that you're not doing right now. One would be paying a 5% dividend from the refuge utility that could go to the general fund, as well as paying a 1.25% gross receipts tax, which your other utilities are paying, and we'll talk more about how that might work. And then lastly, option 3 would be a private refuse hauling contractor. We'll use the term franchise. You franchise for some other utilities, I understand. Some cities use a franchise for trash collection. The city of Seaward is an example of that, private franchise for trash collection. Key nuance between options 1 and 3. In option 1, you're selling your right forevermore to provide trash service. But in option 3, you still retain your certificate, but you're contracted with someone else for those services, and you could change contractors, or you could even decide to get back into the business and provide service again as a municipality if you're unhappy with your contract arrangements after the contract expired. Typically, franchise agreements are 5 to 10 years, but I've seen some that are shorter and I've seen some that are longer. A key item with respect to the franchise agreement would be implementing a franchise fee, kind of similar to the dividend under the continued municipal service. You assess a franchise fee or negotiate a franchise fee as part of the trash franchise. So with those 3 options, let's jump right into our findings. I'm going to spend most of my time. We've got 8 findings here on 2 pages. So the first finding is that while you're the exclusive service provider now in your service areas for residential and most of the commercial, if you are to sell the utility, the commercial would become non-exclusive. We met with the RCA. They're of the mindset that if you sell it, then the commercial would become like it is in the waste collection service area. Other service providers could come in and compete for that service. We looked at some tonnage data from your landfill, and it looks like more than 90% of the commercial service in the waste connections area is served by waste connections. So it doesn't appear that there's a lot of vigorous competition going on now, but that could certainly change. And if you were to sell the refuge utility, and if Waste Connections was not the successful buyer, I would expect that then you would have some very vigorous price competition between a buyer of that and Waste Connections. If Waste Connections were the successful buyer, you might not see that sort of vigorous customer competition. In finding number 2, we estimated a range of values from the sale of $19 to $27 million. That includes all of the rolling stock equipment, containers, and the like. But I guess given the exclusivity issue, or the loss of commercial exclusivity if you sell it, combined with a small number of industry players that are here operating, I think you're probably likely to be more towards the low end than the high end of this range. In the end, there are a lot of different variables, and each potential bidder is going to make its own assumptions of the risk in this deal, and they'll come up with their own answers. And in the end, unless and until you actually see proposals or bids, you don't know for sure whether those numbers are going to lie. I did speak with a number of folks in the industry operating in all sorts of different places, and one thing that was very clear is they all use very different assumptions about how they would value this thing. There's not one kind of set of industry standards. Some of them might look at it as a real strategic attempt to get into the Alaska Peninsula. Others might not care about that whatsoever. And who would ultimately propose is very uncertain. In finding number 3, so once you got that $19 to $27 million, if indeed you were successful getting that much, we've assumed for analytical purposes that it's invested in the MOA trust fund. Your investment consultant is estimating a 5-year return of roughly 6.5%. So I calculated this range of $1.2 to $1.7 million using the investment consultant's assumed rate of return. But as all of you know from your 401k statements or your stock brokerage statements, if you have them, returns are certainly not steady at 6.5% in any given year. They go up, they go down, they could be negative. So when you're evaluating this, you need to recognize that that's not a guaranteed cash flow in any given year.
Just on that point, I mean,
Yes.
we do use a 5-year average when we take money from the trust fund, so it does balance out the highs and lows.
Thank you, Marcelo.
Yep.
So then against those returns that you get from investing the proceeds, there's the loss of the IGCs that we talked about. So in finding number 4, we estimate that there's roughly $700,000 in overhead costs, fixed overhead costs that wouldn't appear to go away if you sold the refuse utility. Some of that is the fixed cost of operating the general solid waste utility. You have a director, for example. He manages both the trash collection operation and landfill operation. Landfill operation, transfer stations, that's all going to stay. You're not going to let the director go. So his salary is fixed, regardless of whether you sell the trash operation or not. And that's just an example of some of the types of things that are in solid waste administrative overhead. But then on top of that, there's another $438,000 of general government overhead that really has absolutely nothing to do with trash or solid waste. The support services, the municipal attorney's office, the city hall, all of those costs get allocated to different departments and different utilities, and the refuse operation supports some of those, so those would need to be reallocated. So going to the next page, 5, finding number 5, we turn to, what if you retain the municipal operation? And assuming that you implemented a dividend of 5%, and that 5% is authorized in your existing city code, doesn't require some new legislative action. That would generate some additional funding, roughly $538,000. And then on top of that, there's some language, again in your city code, that has the utilities subject to a 1.25% MUSA, gross receipts, or 1.25% of gross operating revenue, but it specifically exempted refuse. So you'd have to make a change to your ordinance not to exempt refuse if you wanted to do this like you do for some of your other utilities. I would also note with respect to both of those numbers, whether it's the 1.25% or the 5%, they're established by your statutes. So you can set them at higher or lower levels should you choose to. But it would require obviously a vote to do that. Item 6, we're looking at your cash balance, and the refuse utility is very flush right now. You got a rate increase a year or two ago, and it's generating a lot of cash. And the fund balance, not the fund balance, the cash balance is at roughly $7.5 million. That was a preliminary estimate from the end of last year. If you assumed that as an operation, a trash operation, you needed a 3-month operating reserve, that's often quoted as a reasonable figure. That would equate to about $2.2 million if you have a 3-month operating reserve, or 25% of the annual operating budget. So that tells me, you might have as much as $5 million over what you really would need, to handle the normal ups and downs in the refuse fund. Now, if there is some special capital expenditure or something that's being planned for, you're going to build a new large facility, well then perhaps you want to have that funding. But to the best of my knowledge, there's generally nothing along those lines that's anticipated. There is a need to buy some new containers so that the commercial bins can all be collected using the same type of truck. Right now, we've got 2 types of containers being used out in the field, which means you're not able to route it as efficiently as you would like. So certainly, if you could spend some money to get all those containers the same type, you could increase the efficiency of your operations. To the extent if you move some of the refuse utility fund balance or cash balance to the general fund, and if you get down to a much smaller balance, then I think you need to have a good strategic, probably 5-year rate plan that shows how are you going to adjust customer rates in a way they're going to ensure that you continue to have, the minimum fund balance needed to effectively manage the operation. At least in the last number of years, it looks like there's periods where rates have not been changed for a long, long time. Then you have a very, big bump up, and those types of things usually are not the most popular with customers. Usually kind of a slow, steady increase often is preferable in many jurisdictions based on my experiences, but certainly we've seen them done other ways. With respect to item number 7, finding number 7, you could retain your utility certificate and privatize refuse by contracting with another company. To do that, cities of Seaward, the city of Sitka are both examples of cities that do that. And Seaward does have a franchise fee. It's 3%. If you were to explore this option, my suggestion would be that you would seek proposals from private contractors that would inherit your current rates and your rate structure. You would tell them how those rates are going to be adjusted over time, CPI or whatever formula you're going to do, and then you tell them, propose a franchise fee. You know what you're getting. Propose a franchise fee. As you'll see in my summary slide that follows, I use for example purposes 5%. Doesn't mean you get 5%. Maybe you get 10, or maybe you get 2. You're not going to know unless you test the markets. But right now, it appears there's some pretty good wiggle room in those current rates. You're generating cash, so you might be able to have franchise fees that's larger than what I've shown for example purposes. The last finding, item 8, addresses customer rates. Based on some surveys and some work done by the staff, it appears that both the residential and commercial rates on average in the waste connections areas are higher than they are in the municipal areas. Now, there could be a number of reasons for that. As an example, you have an integrated residential trash and recycling rate. Everybody gets recycling. They think of it almost as free because it's one rate that's provided. That's not the case in the waste connections area. Under the RCA regulation, there's a separate trash and a separate recycling rate. And as a result, probably a lot of customers don't subscribe to recycling because they don't want to pay for it. And if you don't have many customers subscribing to the service, it makes it hard to be efficient in the provision of that service, and the rates are going to be higher for it. So there's a little bit of a disconnect in making there is a 21% difference between the rates, but because of the way the services are offered, it's a little difficult to conclude that one is more or less efficient than the other. On the commercial side, commercial services are more similar, and again, it appears that the Anchorage, the municipalities' rates are about 13% less than what they are in the waste connection areas. But again, they're different zones, different mixes of businesses, and anytime you try to do rate comparisons, there's some limitations as a result. All that said, from a pricing standpoint, it looks like the current operation is reasonably efficient to me, just from what we see on the pricing side. So my last slide on page 6 tries to bring it all together. So in option 1, We see there on the first row, the sale price, the 19 to $26.9 million, a rate of return of roughly 6.5%, leading to annual investment income of $1.2 to $1.7 million. But you lose the IGCs, so you end up with a net annual benefit of $549,000 to a little over $1 million. Compare that in option 2 to the 5% dividend and the 1.25% gross receipts tax could generate roughly $672,000 for you. And then in option 3, the franchise fee on a contracted operation, 5% fee would generate $538,000. But again, you may be able to get a much larger franchise fee than that. You'd have to test the markets to see. So in closing, I think you got a lot of good options. The general fund can be helped in a variety of different ways here. When I look at my clients and they go through these sorts of decisions, it's often more a philosophical question and a matter of your policy priorities than it is a financial question. In those cities where the goal is to retain maximum control of service quality or maximum control of customer rates, continue to provide some good paying jobs in the community, a lot of those jurisdictions lean towards public service. If the goal is to downsize government, to contract for services, to reduce future pension obligations, you might lean towards a franchise or selling the utility. And there's not a right or a wrong answer. There's just different ways and different priorities in different communities, and that's why different communities have different types of services. I would suggest that if you're going to explore privatization, that you would seek bids under 2 options. One would be an outright sale of the utility. At the same time, have them propose a franchise fee for contracted service. In the end, you have much more control over service quality, much more control over customer rates through a franchise, as well as the ability to someday down the road you wanted to return to public service, you could. Because when companies buy things, they discount future income. Often you don't get as much selling something as if you're willing to wait and collect that money over a period of time. So I think it would well be worth looking at what sort of a franchise fee you might get out of it, if indeed you're going down the route of privatization. And then when you get the bid back, you can compare real numbers and see which option seems to make more sense for you. So those are my prepared remarks. Thank you all for having me. I've had an opportunity to try a number of wonderful restaurants up here in Anchorage over the last few nights, and actually tonight being my final night, I'm going to try the mayor's steakhouse.
All right. Mr. Chairman, before we go to questions, you want anything else? You want to say anything else before we go to questions?
No, I thought great presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Steele, you're head of our activities. We'll start with you.
Yeah.
I'm limiting everybody to 5 minutes, and then we'll come back for seconds and thirds.
Yeah, good presentation. Did you in any way look at operational trends in terms of, I know that some of the documents that I saw from Solid Waste Services looks 3 or 4 years back in terms of not only income, but things like injuries or medical costs or time lost.
We did not do an operational study.
And the one thing that we, the Assembly, were asking that the mayor provide is public benefits to the public. I'm also concerned about benefits to the ratepayers in terms of the options. And did you look at those? What would be the public benefit to selling property? And you touched on a few in terms of either a positive where we're providing employment. There's also the negative side that you pointed out as well in terms of the retirement. Is there any positive in terms of the interaction between the collection and the disposal? Is there going to be anything lost by taking the collection out of the mix?
There are some synergies between the collection and disposal side. Maybe synergies isn't the right word, but flexibility to utilize staff for one operation and the other in the case of a special program or an emergency or something like that. That would be the primary one from an operational standpoint. In terms of the impact on the ratepayer, to the extent that any money is moved to the general fund, whether it's from a dividend on the public collection, or whether it's from a franchise fee on a private operator, or whether it's the sale of the utility to a private operator who then charges higher rates, if indeed they do, which it looks like they may do in the commercial areas. Well, then you have a transfer, kind of a funding from, to the general fund. Well, the general fund is also belongs to, the taxpayers, if you will, of Anchorage. So it's a matter of changing the way you're funding local government.
I think that's all I have at the moment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. I've just been writing notes as you spoke, but thank you very much for the presentation. And one of the things that you said, and it's in your handout, is that the utility is flush in generating cash. And as far as I'm concerned, I know that there's an issue with the utility right now in terms of providing dumpsters as large, I don't know what the dimensions are, but large dumpsters that Alaska Waste uses. And right now, because the utility doesn't have those dumpsters, they have to make an agreement with Alaska Waste when they do pick up garbage in their service area. So, I mean, some of that excess cash can be used by our utility to buy the equipment that they need to do the job that needs to be done. And then you said that the current operation is reasonably efficient. And another thing that concerns me is right here, I mean, it's real clear that it's going to cost our constituents more money, if this utility is so. How do we explain to our constituents an increase in service because the municipality decided to sell the utility? I have several other questions, and I don't want to take up everybody's time, so I'm probably going to put them in writing and expect an answer, not probably, but an answer before Tuesday. But my final comment is this, okay? Why are we here? The utility is doing great. Why are we even talking about selling it? I'm a little puzzled, especially based on the presentation.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I could respond to that.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
We have a number of options. We're not talking about selling utility. We're talking about maximizing the return to the owners of the utility, which is the people of Anchorage. We all own this utility. So the question was, how do we maximize that return while still maintaining an efficient operation? And as Laith mentioned, there's 3 options. So don't think just in terms of selling the utility. It's one of several options.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Go
really
ahead.
quick. I think all 3 options don't even need to be discussed, Mr. Mayor. I think things are fine just the way they are. But thank you.
Ms.
Thank you,
Johnston,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chairman.
Yes, a couple of things, and I might have gone ADD while I was listening and missed this, but did you take into account the mandatory service area versus outside
You
the
what?
solid waste service area?
Put you right after Evans.
We did. It's shown in the economic results that are before you. And should, to the extent that you sell it, if you were to lose the mandatory provision, that would be one of many risks to the buyer, and I think is reflected in the range of discount rates or interest rates we use to discount cash flows. One thing to keep in mind is that the commercial is what drives this thing. That's where that's the largest chunk. I think it's roughly 70% of the whole operation. The residential is a much smaller piece, and the residential doesn't generate a lot of surplus cash flow.
So, and Paul, as far as the franchise, when you've studied other areas, have you also looked at the models of the managed competition where it's not just whether you contract it out, but you also allow the public utility itself to bid for the service to see if it's even worthy to franchise out?
Yeah, I have seen jurisdictions do that. The city of Beverly Hills, where we worked for, was one that had municipal service for residential, and they had a commercial operation that had to compete with other private haulers, kind of like they do in the Waste Connections commercial area. They went through that sort of a process, decided to retain the residential service as a municipal operation after going through that competitive process, but got out of the commercial business. City of Phoenix is another jurisdiction that goes through a formal process of having the public operation bid against the private operations. I guess the one challenge to that is that sometimes the private haulers, if they've got a long-term perspective, will come in and bid it low enough to get the public operation out if they're in a situation where they're bidding against the public, knowing that it's highly unlikely they would get back in. And then, when the contract comes up and it's coming due the next time, they may have a higher bid.
Good point. The when you were assessing it, did you take into account the pension funds?
To the extent that the cost of the current operation is reflective of the pensions, which my understanding that they're now paying their share. It is.
Was that part of the IGCs you were looking at, or was it?
No, I think it's part of the direct cost of labor.
Direct cost of. And my last question was, did you take into account that also if we did sell this service, and I think probably, I'm not sure even if we franchised out, if then it would go to the RCA as far as regulation?
It would, and we met with the RCA, and they would exert jurisdiction if it's sold.
If it's sold, how about franchised out? What did they say?
Since you would still own the utility certificate, it does not appear that they would. But that being said, until something actually happens, you never know for certain how the RCA is going to interpret something.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans, sir.
Yeah, Ms. Gray Jackson's questions prompted me. My question is, why is it that the city is in the refuse business in the first place when it's an industry that can certainly be handled by the private sector, which it is for a good portion of our city already? I think the question is why we're making that a
We could
public
have the
service.
Bears do it.
The Bears? Brings up a whole other issue. That's all.
Recycling. Ms. Dabowski, ma'am.
Mr. Evans, I think I actually know the answer to your question. It's because this entity was developed when there wasn't one. And so the city took over the business because there wasn't one. But I think as assembly members and as stewards of the people's assets, we have to think about this as an exercise in it, like a board of trustees. You're managing an asset, and sometimes I think it's difficult to separate sometimes the political hat from the board of trustees hat. And I think these are good options to start the dialogue to see if it's even something that should be considered. It's just a routine exercise in the private sector to go through just to reevaluate your assets to see, is this the best way that we're maximizing our shareholders' money, essentially. So it's an interesting concept, but there are many. This is a complicated topic, and I say that for a variety of reasons, because we see a low and a high, but one of the things we have to remember is we have no bids in front of us. So though a low or a high might be there, because of the essential, unique service area where, it's mandated essentially. If you go to sell it, that's out. So just as Leigh said, the low area is probably closer to where it will be, but it doesn't mean you won't get a bid that's $7 million instead of 19. You just don't know until they're in front of you. So that's why I say, I find these exercises to be one that are very, very helpful. As a trustee, you look at that and you say, okay, do we want a guaranteed return? Option 2, at 6.25, but it means we have to go into code and we have to change some of these dividends or create them. Or, is it something that, okay, if we do sell it and you get the money, you have to make sure you don't just squander it, right? And then we're looking at the 5-year average. The average is 6.48. What is our typical 5-year average? I can't think off the top of my head. What is that?
6.48 is what we've been.
Okay, that's what I was, where I was going.
That's the projection going forward, but historically, we've done really well the last.
Right, the last couple of years we've made
Almost like, that's what I was going. Yeah.
And
So-
since now we're looking at 7.
Yeah, so that's why I say this is to me this is a very helpful exercise. Great commentary. I think there's a lot of, like Jennifer had pointed out, there's a lot of other factors. I think there's a lot of other factors that I think we need to talk about too. But I appreciate the exercise and thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Gray Jackson,
I'll pass. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnston.
Do we know where our last appraisal of this business, I can't remember where that came in.
10 to 20.
Anything else, Sheriff? Anything else, ma'am?
Yeah. Well, I was just
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
in following up on Ms. Domboski's comment and Ms. Gray Jackson's. One of the reasons that we did this exercise is because we did receive entrees from private sector firms, and we felt it was our due diligence to find out whether or not those were, entrees that we should proceed with and bring to the assembly or not. So it was not just triggered as an academic exercise. There was indeed, a stimulus from the private sector that said, what is it worth, and what's the best return for us as Ms. Domboski said, as trustees for the folks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Peterson, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for me, the number that jumps out at me is the 21% difference in the rates for the residential customers. We just had a significant rate increase, I believe, last year, somewhere in the 15 to 20% range. And if we sell the utility and it's regulated by the utility or by the RCA, I think in a relatively short period of time, the rates are going to be identical. And so our customers that are solid waste service customers right now will see in the vicinity of a 40% increase in a rather short period of time. And I don't think that's fair to them.
Mr. Steele, sir.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to point out. We have in our budget book, our 2015 budget book, a page that that basically breaks down what the returns were and what the costs were for the past 4 or 5 years, and the trend. Well, first off, the management of this particular operation has only been in place for about 3 years, and the trend line for the operation of solid waste, the collection part of it, of solid waste services, is earning more and more each year. There is a plan to make some purchases of the commercial bins so that we can try to take back some of the recycle, mainly the recycle part of the commercial operation, and there's some expansion plans. This particular operation made over $2 million this last year. Did pay the $65,000 to the city, and the city has taken a dividend of a few $1 million, but there's a tandem, there's a synergistic impact between the current operation, the collection operation, and the landfill. And there are some costs that are shared, but also in terms of the pot of earnings that were saved earnings, also is there to protect against some EPA problems if we ever had to do closure of the landfill. So there are the opportunities to share that and not have to go out to commercial money should there be some kind of problem. I think it's managed well. I think it's doing well going forward. The only complaints I've had, and you guys can chime up if you will, are against the commercial operator, or with the commercial operator as opposed to with solid waste services. Except there were some bears that were upset that we're going to take away their
Feeding ground?
Feeding ground. But all in all, I don't see anything in here that tells me that selling or even contracting out is a viable option. I know the mayor is a believer in managed competition. This is managed competition. You have a private sector doing a job, you have a public sector doing a job, and you can compare what's best for the ratepayers and what's best for the citizens. So I thought it was a good exercise. Thank you for your effort.
Any other questions from assembly members? Anything else, Mr. Mayor?
No, just a quick follow-up. Until, I think as Lee said, until you actually get bids, you really don't know what
Until you actually sell it, you really don't know until you have a history of the returns.
Well, if you get a sale price and it's, at the investment return that is projected for the number of years, then you can really do an analysis of what does that mean to the owner. So until you get that number, it's still.
In this option, we are making more now with it than the high option that's proposed.
Lee, thank you very much for your study. We appreciate it, sir.
You're welcome, and Earth Day has just come and gone, so may you all recycle as much as possible, and thanks for the opportunity to work in your fine city.
Thank you, sir. This meeting's over with.